Takeo, my name is Jeremy Carlson. Thank you for joining me. I'm going to do this presentation in English. I hope that's okay. Appreciate it, though. Thank you. So I run our global OEM program, right? So I work with our partners to integrate our technologies into their products so that they can take them to market. So I'm going to go back a little bit. Back in the history, 10 plus years ago, a very famous venture capitalist mentioned that software is going to eat the world. Well, it happened. A decade later, software has eaten the world. And that's where we're at today, right? So everywhere is software. Everything we do around us is software. Everything I'm holding in my hand works with software. So we need to now figure out how do we intelligently design that software to have security built in from the beginning. The idea being that with security built in, that the developer then becomes responsible for creating better code, which is really a team effort, from the product managers designing the software to the folks building the software and writing the code. But this term has become called shift left, meaning let's bring the security into the developers. But it's been going on for a while now, and it's not really as easy as it sounds, and really we focus too much on just checking the code, on just looking at the things that are in the code and ensuring the developers didn't introduce a bug or some type of vulnerability. But it's actually so much more than that, and we really need to focus on what else can be brought into the developer toolset to help them. There's a whole bunch of tools that came from the operations side that we have at Kaspersky that can now be incorporated by developers into their projects so they can make intelligent decisions about projects or packages before they use them. In our last presentation about threat intelligence, we talked a lot about basically how the different types of packages are being infected, right? We saw the PyPy and the NPM and all the different libraries having infected pieces of code in them, and the developers having to sort that out. That's not really fair to them. So how do we empower them with better choices and give them a heads up when we know certain packages and things are malicious? So there's a few really big things creating a complete change in how we look at security. These are very large global trends, right? 5 very large global trends that are occurring. The first one we're all very familiar with, digital transformation, right? So there's a lot of threats that go into digitizing our entire world, right? And every corporation in the world is up against these exact same threats, right? So it's not just about Asia Pacific or geo areas, it's actually global phenomena, right? Basically, as we create digital transformation, we create new problems by taking old world materials, things that were written down, and turning them into files and then uploading them, right? This creates a complete opportunity for attackers to bring that type of content into your organization. We can kind of talk about all the different threats statistics here, but and I tried to base them, geographically relevant to here, but the reality is these stats are everywhere. I show this demonstration across the world, and every different geo has these same problems. The same thing with mobile first, right? What does mobile first mean? It means that most people in the world are not going to look at things through a web browser on their laptop. They're only going to look at things through their phone or a mobile operating system. So no longer is it just what's Windows threats or what are Linux threats or what are Mac threats. This is now all about Android and iOS. Almost everybody has a smartphone. There's 8 billion people in the world, 6.8 billion smartphones. That means almost everyone has access to a smartphone. Very few people actually have a laptop. We're of the few in the world that do get to have this, but the people exploiting this know that most people are on a mobile phone. They know that these operating systems have much more difficulty protecting themselves and figuring out what is a threat from what isn't a threat. Phishing is the #1 thing that's happening on mobile devices. It's very hard to tell when something's fake or illegitimate when it comes to you through your SMS or through some of these other mediums that we're not used to being able to validate the source of. The next thing that's happening, and I think it kind of goes hand in hand with mobile, is the rise of the cloud, right? And we talk about the cloud ambiguously these days. The cloud is everywhere. The cloud is this. The cloud is the back end of the mobile first movement. That's part of why the cloud is going exploding for us, right? On your mobile device, there's some information, but an app is just a browser that's specific for that use case. And that use case goes to a web server in the cloud. And that is where we're seeing a whole bunch of trouble starting to unfold. So the same threats that you see on a mobile device and on a website, they're identical, right? They both go back to a server in the cloud. This also is where corporations are storing a lot of their data. They're doing a lot of processing. The digital transformation is all about bringing this stuff to the cloud. So you'll see a lot of these breaches are really just about misconfiguration with the cloud. I talked a little bit about this trend shifting left, right? But this is the idea that we need to help the developers develop more secure software from the beginning, right? And that's really at the heart of what I'm here to talk about today. And this trend definitely is dwarfed by things like digital transformation, but really it's just actually a subset of those same concepts. So the idea being that, you know, we need to bring the operational security, the information that you saw in the last presentation about threat intelligence, into the hands of the developers so that they can make these same choices. And one of the biggest things is almost every developer has inadvertently grabbed a bad package and developed with it. And even if it wasn't bad when they developed it, it then became known as something with the vulnerability in it. So that's really where we have to help the developers with our operational tools and intelligence. And then finally, you know, the whole world is separating. I don't have to talk to you guys about geopolitical sensitivity. We're all living it. It doesn't matter what country you're in, where you're from. We are all facing this, right? And so threat intelligence has really become something that's focused on this concept, right? And how do we help our organizations globally use the right threat intelligence for the products that they're building? So how does Kaspersky address these, right? Well, so we have those large trends, and I'll talk more about them in a minute, but I wanted to kind of bring up the different scenarios that my partners have that they use us in, right? So we have customers as developers, right? So we have banks who take our mobile SDK and put it into their app to protect their customers. We have networking vendors who take our SDK and threat intelligence and put it into their firewalls, proxies, routers, gateways. We have desktop vendors who are building different apps for the desktop, sometimes even different antivirus apps. And they take our threat intelligence, our software, they build it into their applications that live on the desktop to enhance their security. They take our vulnerability feeds and build that into choosing better software to build with. Cloud providers, same similar thing. They're taking a lot of our product sets, particularly our threat intelligence, they're building it into the tools and products that they have on the back end. So if you're a cloud provider and you're providing web application firewall, but you don't necessarily have signatures from different geo areas, this is where we can help. We can bring to you our threat intelligence to add to your web application firewall, for example, or your intrusion prevention system. Mobile app vendors, I talked a bit about this, you know, with the bank scenario, but it's not just limited to those types of apps. Think any mobile application that we can talk about. We can bring security into that type of application or bring at least the intelligence that we have about threats to that application. And finally, MSPs and integrators. We have quite a lot of those in our ecosystem of partners. They build a lot of tools. They do a lot of different types of security, right? More than just your basic desktop antivirus that we might be thinking of when we think of vendors like Kaspersky. So let's kind of walk through each trend and talk a little bit about the questions you should be asking yourself and then sort of talk about the sort of threat that comes with that. So, you know, I always ask this, I go around, I say, how many of you are building apps internally? You know, I get a pretty good amount of folks raising hands. And I go, so are you developing them yourselves? And, you know, those hands stay up for that because, yeah, everybody's building apps these days, right? And then are you digitizing documents? Of course you are. That's part of digital transformation, right? And are any of them controlling industrial servers? You'd be surprised how many folks have that in their environment and how many of us are actually linked to this without even understanding it. So the thing that's happening, and is a big piece of what we're doing with our technology alliances, we're helping people who build, like, say, a web application. You're a mortgage company, and people want to upload files to you all the time. Those files can contain malicious content, not just viruses, but phishing links, fileless malware. There's a whole bunch of stuff that can be embedded, macros into Excel files that are malicious. So anything, when you're building internal apps and those apps are accepting files, they need to be checked. And this is a really important one, and I don't want to spend too much time on it, but desktop antivirus doesn't stop this, right? So you can have desktop antivirus on your laptop. That doesn't help this. You can have it on the server, the web server that has this application on it. That doesn't stop this, because the file never lands on that server. The file gets uploaded from the mobile device or your laptop to that server's application and then goes into some type of storage repository. There's no point at that time that your desktop antivirus is looking at this. You have to use products like our SDK or scan engine to build into your application as you're building it to check these files. You cannot have them unchecked. They'll go into a repository, sit there, and then someone says, oh, let's pull that up, and then they're exposed. So, or worse yet, you have a third-party partner who pulls those files into their organization, and now you've just infected them. So building with deliberate tools like our SDK and scan engine for checking malicious files is critical to things like digital transformation. So let's talk a little bit about mobile applications. I mean, everybody's got one in their organization or is building one. You know, same kind of thing. Do you have any mobile applications that you're using in your business? You know, are you getting complaints from users about fraud and scams? Every bank in the world is, by the way. We see this everywhere in the world, right? It's not related to any geography. Every bank is facing these problems. And, you know, the idea is the device itself needs to be checked, right? And so you want to know if the device is jailbroken or rootkitted, right? And so that's really the story with Kaspersky's mobile SDK. We have a product that basically can be integrated into any mobile application. And the idea is that the device integrity is really the key to everything in mobile security. So a lot of people talk about mobile security. They'll say, hey, you know, I'm really worried about my app. You know, is my app exposed, right? And the idea is like, yeah, your app is important, but like, let's think about what an app is on a phone. It's just a browser, really. Most of the intelligence of that app lives in a server up in the cloud. So developing a strong app, important, but the same threats that mobile applications face are the exact same that web applications face, right? So they're the same things. If you go look at the OWASP top 10 threats, they're identical for mobile and web. There's no difference between them. So the reality is that we really need to ensure that the device itself is not the problem. So we can secure the web server behind the mobile app. That's no problem. We can make the app harden pretty easy. What's really hard is when the app is on a jailbroken device. And I'm logging into my bank, and it's screen capturing the whole thing because it's jailbroken. That's where the problems really start. And I have a lot of trouble explaining this to the organizations I work with when they say, I really want to make sure my app isn't exposed. Your app is fine. The problem is the device it's on, right? And the attackers aren't worried about attacking the app anymore. They know that if they can jailbreak that phone, or if they can put a malicious app on there that can record what's happening, that's how they're really getting into it. And so having things like our mobile SDK inside your application when you build it is a way to ensure none of this other stuff is actually going on that completely circumvents what you'd think of as traditional security issues. So let's talk a little bit about cloud. The idea is, you know, everybody's running applications in the cloud, right? We just talked about this, right? So from digital transformation to the mobile first, it all means that these things are living in the cloud, and all of our devices, most of the brains are living in the cloud, right? So, you know, what can you do? How can you ensure that those repositories aren't getting filled with malware, right? Almost everybody in this building is using some type of cloud storage. It doesn't have to be AWS S3 buckets or the most popular kind of cloud storage. Any cloud storage presents a problem, basically. So what we want to look for, same thing I've been talking about, is making sure that we have products in place as you build your application, or tools that you can put into your application to ensure that those repositories are malware-free. And a lot of folks have humongous repositories of data, and they go, I have no idea what's really in there. Tools like our scan engine or our SDK can sit and run in the background and constantly monitor these, look through, find, using our latest and best threat intelligence. So just because you ran through the petabyte of files one time, that doesn't mean you caught everything. Every day, every 20 minutes, we're updating our antivirus feed. You need something that can rapidly look at that content proactively, perpetually. So you're constantly looking at what's happening in those files. Are those files potentially infected? You know, what's really going on in there, right? And it's huge amounts of data. So you need things that are really fast. So we have tools like our scan engine, which is effectively the insides of our endpoint agent, right? So we took the best pieces of that and turned it into a software development kit. So now you can take that product, put it inside anywhere in your cloud, above your repositories. We have native integration. It can sit as a Docker image alongside any of your storage and look through those perpetually, and as files come in and as files go out, so that you're always able to look at what's happening in the cloud. So let's talk a little bit about shift left, right? So, you know, this is a really kind of a touchy subject. I don't know how many of you are developers in here, but I feel like the whole security world has now decided that the problem is on your lap, okay? And it's not. It is not the responsibility of the developer to necessarily be able to identify what's bad code from good code, what's a security tool from not. We all are on it together, right? So shift left as a code review process was a good first start, but I think all of us are part of solving this problem, right? This is a much, much bigger problem than just as simply saying something like, oh, let's put it on the lap of the developer. The developer needs to pick the better code. So this is really where things like supply chain getting compromised, right? This is our big topic. This is fundamental to the nation state security, right? Is, are we picking things for our applications that are secure? Are we choosing the right libraries to build these products, right? And I think that's the big problem, is who knows, right? And so having things like Kaspersky's vulnerability feed, our open source feed, and integrating them into your CI/CD pipeline. So your JFrog or whatever products you're using to build your applications with, you can now go get tools from people like Kaspersky to integrate into those development environments and actually develop things that with the help of choosing the right libraries, right? And there's so many ways to, and I should just advance this, but there's so many ways to choose the wrong library, right? They do things like type squatting. They make stuff look exactly like the file you think you were supposed to get, or the piece of code that you really wanted, and it looks identical to the right one, but it's the wrong one, just like they do with everything else in our world today, right? We're all experiencing this. So the idea is being, you know, can we help our developers build better code, right? And through tools that we have on the operations side. And if you really look at, like, what does Kaspersky do? We have this huge threat intelligence. The endpoint agent and the EDR and all that stuff we talk about is really important, but at the source, at the core of what it's doing, it's running that threat intelligence that we have and utilizing it in different ways to do these detections. And so this is just yet another concept of that, and taking it from the operational side of the DevOps concept and bringing it over to the dev side, right? So from an operations thing where we use it every day to stop real-time attacks, bringing it into the developer side to help them make better decisions based on the intelligence we've derived from the operations side. So this one's always a bit touchy. I won't be around the bush. Geopolitics is everywhere. We're all experiencing it. You know, so this is really important, right? Like, you can't necessarily count on one source of threat intelligence. You really need to have a portfolio of threat intelligence. Now, that doesn't mean you need 10 antivirus engines. That's not what I'm talking about. And in fact, it's proven that that's not very effective. We have lots of people who are multi-antivirus engine entities, and they give us statistics all the time. What I'm talking about is more, how do these antivirus companies get their signatures, right? So if you go talk to any antivirus vendor or any security vendor here that's really doing actual security and creating their own content, they do it through a number of ways, but the number one way is all the endpoints that are distributed around the globe send telemetry back to headquarters, right? And that's how we collect most of our malware samples, right? And so where that company's endpoints are located really dictates the type of content that they're seeing at the end of the day. And so I don't want to expose, too much of the secrets behind the curtain here, but the reality is some vendors have endpoints in one part of the world and some vendors have endpoints in the other part of the world. Most of the vendors are in this part of the world. Very few are in this part of the world, right? And so from a geopolitical sensitivity standpoint, having content from a vendor who has all of those in different places is critical, okay? And so that's where a lot of this kind of comes into and I don't want to say US and Western, but there's some reality to this, you guys. This is a sensitive topic. I don't want to be around the bush about it, but 400 million endpoints by Kaspersky are deployed around the globe. Most of those aren't in the United States, right? Most of those aren't even in Western nations, right? And they're actually in locations where a lot of the threats that we all face are coming from. So if you want content that is coming from a place where the malware is being developed and is probably being tested first before it even hits the Western world, you need to work with other vendors like Kaspersky who have this ability to see this content early on, basically. I can tell you that from my perspective as the OEM person, I have some of the largest companies in the world and largest governments in the world taking our content and putting it into their products to help ensure those products are safe. Why would they choose that? Because of things like this, right? They have plenty of options. They could OEM from any vendor here in the building, but yet they continue to OEM from us simply because of where our endpoints are located, where our researchers have advantages basically over other vendors. So this is a big piece of the story, basically. So I don't want you to just take my word for it though, right? I'm mentioning large vendors and things, but this is across the globe, right? So I picked a couple from kind of the Asia Pacific region to talk about, but there's many vendors here in this building that are partners with Kaspersky using our threat intelligence, using our SDKs, using any number of products that we have, our APIs, to enhance their security of their products, right? And so that's why I'm here, is because my partners are here, right? So this is really, I have kind of the Huawei example. We're part of their mobile products. I have the Tencent. Tencent's a great example because they actually aren't using our product commercially at all. They took our software developer kit, our antivirus software developer kit, and put it into their IM product, their instant messaging product, internally. So they have 100,000 employees using instant messaging to talk to each other with our SDK checking all the files and all the links sent across that platform. So it's not even something that's an OEM necessarily, but has been integrated into their product set. IIJ has us in a lot of places, right? The trend with them is kind of cloud everything, right? But they're using our sandbox in their cloud to help check things. They're using us in their mobile products. They're using our threat intelligence across their entire portfolio of products. So very, very large scale deployment. The geopolitical one's kind of interesting because you could kind of put that on anything, but we have some vendors who basically have rebranded our product. So we have the ability to take our products and put a different brand across them so that folks can take those to market in their own geographies. So these folks at Northgard for years now in Denmark have had our endpoint product branded as a Northgard product, and they go to market with it. And the reason is they don't want to reinvent the wheel. They want to preserve their brand. They're not known as an antivirus vendor. They're actually in a completely different line of business, but they wanted to supply security in general to their customers. And so Northgard actually rebrands the Kaspersky product and takes it to market. And then a lot in Israel, another vendor who does a lot with the files that are being uploaded. They do inspection of all the content that's going kind of between their customers. They are a security vendor. So again, this is an interesting scenario where it's a security vendor OEMing from a security vendor, which that's understandable, right? But just wanted to kind of illustrate that, like, it doesn't matter what line of business you're in. If you're building applications, if you're making choices on which libraries to use while you're building those applications, there's no point in reinventing the wheel. These products already exist and are available to your developers to use as part of their development platform. So, you know, a little bit of kind of the summary here, right? I want to kind of sum all this up and make sense of it all, right? So software is part of every business. That we've established. Attackers now know how to poison those tools. It's not just my presentation, not just their presentation on threat intelligence, but every presentation you're going to see here talks about this concept, right? So this is really important. The idea of then shifting that responsibility onto the developer is inappropriate. And in fact, is totally focused on just looking at the code and making sure there aren't vulnerabilities in the code. That's a good first step, but we need to do other things like make sure they have our operational intelligence when they're choosing which tools to use, which libraries to select from. So this is the other thing that's going on, right, is these libraries that they're choosing from, they can be safe today and a problem tomorrow. So a developer has a lot of trouble identifying that. That's not their job. They have no idea that some new vulnerability was found in this piece of code they chose, and an exploit's been developed for it and now had a virus created around it. They're not familiar with the kill chain that's occurring and the daily changes in this. So we have to bring the things that we're doing operationally, like these antivirus signatures, over to the development side of the house. So, and that's really, I meant to click that, but that's really what I'm saying here, right, is what's happening is a fundamental shift of operational tools like antivirus and threat intelligence making its way into our developers' world to help them make better selections and be safer with what they're doing from their practices. So the idea is kind of to go beyond shift left, right? That was the fundamental premise of my presentation, is how do we go past what we're doing today to do better things? How do we build with these tools, right? And that's what Kaspersky is bringing to market, is this idea to build with our tools. Originally, these tools were just for our OEM partners, right? But because of things like digital transformation, these large enterprises, any company in the world really, has started to say, hey, I'm building applications. How can I use some of those software developer kits you guys have been giving to your security partners? And that has driven everything, right? That's what's brought all of this to the table, was that digital transformations made everyone a software vendor. Now everyone needs to be more cognizant of what's happening. 10 years ago, I was OEMing exclusively to security vendors, development teams. Today, I have banks, I have mining companies, I have, you name it, across the globe coming to get our developer tools. Seems strange, right? But that's the change that's happening. That's what this whole set of trends is showing you, is that we can no longer just put the antivirus on our desktop and call it good enough. We can't just allow the developers to be responsible for choosing the right tools. We really need to rethink how we're doing all of this and hopefully really build better tools together, right? So I just want to kind of leave you with some of the logos of the folks, right? So you can understand sort of who we're working with, right? And also explain to you that, I'm here to meet you, and if you have interest in any of this, that's the goal, right? We're here to meet with OEMs or cloud platforms or any cybersecurity vendors, right? FinTech, governments. We can empower any and all of that. The world's really changed as far as how this all plays, so we're definitely looking to meet you folks. Please come by our booth. We'd love to talk to you about this. I have tons of examples I can share. We can explain how all of this works, but yeah, we would really love to expand our impression on you of what Kaspersky is. It's not just desktop software. It's not just threat intelligence. It's for everyone, and it's for all developers everywhere developing anything in the world. So with that, I'd like to say thank you, xie xie, and appreciate your time.